Hey everyone, I am Kai Chimura, the host of the Soccerpedia podcast. It's been a while since I've done a new episode. It's just been busy with work, but I'm very glad to be back on the podcast. And for today's episode, I have a returning guest in Jason Longshore, who is a color commentator for Atlanta United. Yeah, I'm looking forward to having him back on the show again. Hey, how's it going, Jason?
Hey, what's going on? How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Good. Sorry I had to cancel last minute on Tuesday.
Oh, it's all good. I understand things
I,
things
I
come up.
should yeah, I should have sent you a message earlier. I actually had the chance Tuesday to get out and go golfing. A
Oh,
friend had a
nice.
tee time and was like, "Yes, I am in because I haven't played all year and I really want to get out while the weather's nice." And I completely forgot to send you a message. It's my
It
bad.
is it is all good. How excited are you for this year's World Cup?
Yeah, really excited. This is going to be a fun one. I'm looking forward to it because I think these groups are really evenly matched. I don't think you have like the old way of a group of death or two groups of death and a couple of really easy groups with the draw being all based on the rankings now. It should be a really fun tournament.
So let's break down each group, even though there's still a couple of outliers to determine who are the final teams in this World Cup. So I figured we can just break down each group from A to H and talk about who's the favorites, who can be some underdog candidates for the tournament. And let's start with Group A. We have the hosts Qatar along with Ecuador, who's making their first return since the 14 World Cup. You have Senegal and then the Netherlands. Oh, just a moment. Someone's calling my classroom real quick. Sorry.
Oh, good.
So you have Ecuador making their return, Senegal, and then the Netherlands making their first return since that same World Cup in 14. So what do you think of that group? Who do you think will come out top?
This one's a little tricky because you have Qatar as the host of the tournament. They're seeded. They're not ranked like a seeded team. They're actually the lowest ranked team that's currently in the tournament. So that throws it out of whack a little bit. The Netherlands are the favorite in the group. I think they're the best team in the group on paper. But this group's pretty wide open because we saw Qatar in the Gold Cup and they were competitive and they're going to have the home crowd with them. They're a total wild card in this tournament. I don't think they get out of the group stage, but we've seen host countries before that you didn't think would get out. And you can look at the US in 1994 and you just get a special thing going when you get that crowd behind you. And if they get a result in the first game against Ecuador, yeah, they could build on that. I think the Netherlands win the group. I think Ecuador is the second best team in the group. I really like this young Ecuadorian side. They're one of the more fun teams if you're looking for a team to follow. If you need somebody else to get behind in this tournament, if your team's not in it, Ecuador is a really fun one. A lot of young talent that's come up from local clubs. Some of the talent has moved on to other leagues around the world, but they're a team that I think can make some noise. They finished third in South America behind Brazil and Argentina in qualifying, just no small feat. So I think Ecuador and the Netherlands get through, but Qatar is the total wild card here.
Okay. And so when it comes to Senegal, I'd say with Africa and South America, I think those are the two toughest regions to qualify for a World Cup because there's really, in South America, you have really no country, even the weaker countries of Bolivia and Venezuela, they still have decent talent. It's just they're
Yeah.
just stuck in a geographically tough group. And then Africa, it's a tough format they do is they have one first whoever comes in first place of that four team group and then they go to another home leg and it's brutal.
Yeah, and Senegal, I'm probably not giving them enough credit here because they're the defending African champions and they got through Egypt in that playoff round to get here. Sadio Mane, one of the best players in the world. I just think Ecuador's a team that maybe a little more battle tested, maybe a team that's just a little bit deeper. But this group, honestly, if any of the four go through, I'm not really shocked. I think it's the Dutch's to lose. I think they win the group, But outside of that, I mean, if Sadio Mane gets hot, Mendy in goal, he gets hot, Senegal can go through. Ecuador has the ability to go through. I think they're my favorite to go through along with the Netherlands. And Qatar is just the wild card. You know, it really depends on if they can get momentum. They get Ecuador first, then they get Senegal. They finish with the Netherlands. They'd love to go into that last game not needing anything. They'd also love for the Netherlands to be through going into that last game, where they might have to rotate some players and Qatar might be able to take advantage. My money's on the Netherlands and Ecuador, but this group's one of the hardest to call.
Okay. Oh, can I take a pause real quick? I have to bring something to a student. I'll be back in like 2 minutes.
Okay, cool.
That's cool. All right. Thank you. Sorry about that.
All good.
Cool. All right. All right. So we've covered Group A. Let's move into Group B, which things get a little bit interesting because we're not sure who the fourth team is in this group. We have England, Iran, the United States, and then between Wales, Scotland, and Ukraine. And so Wales is waiting for the result of Ukraine-Scotland. They're playing in June, given the political conflicts that are going on in the world. Let's start with the team that we're not sure who's going to make it yet. So who's your money on winning of those three remaining European teams?
I think Ukraine's chances are really difficult to determine at this stage. They're going to play Scotland on June 1st. That's been confirmed today. It's just really hard to quantify it. You know, we don't know where they're going to be. They're going to have all the, I think, the goodwill of the world outside of Scotland on, supporting them, but how is preparation going to be for them? Because they have some players who would ordinarily be playing domestically, and that's not happening. So are those players going to be able to contribute? Are they going to have to look for players who have been playing in other countries in Europe right now? How they build their team is completely unknown. I think Wales is probably the favorite out of these three. They got through the first playoff game. They get to this one. I think when you have a player like Gareth Bale in knockout situations, he's somebody who can get you further on, get you into the next round. So with Ukraine's situation with Bale, I think it's going to be Scotland who beats Ukraine, and I think Wales ends up getting through Scotland in a great match. I'm really looking forward to that one. Don't completely discount Scotland getting through, though. Remember, they got a draw against England in the Euros in the group stage. They're a difficult team to deal with. They'll be incredibly motivated. It's been a while since they've been at the World Cup. I just think Wales is a little bit better, and Wales will get through, in my opinion.
Speaking of the World Cup drought, so I don't think Wales has been in a World Cup since the 50s or 58. So it's a long time coming, and easily, mentioned Bale. He's out of those three teams, he's the best player, from any of those countries, and he seems to just play in a whole new mode when he puts on that Welsh shirt. I'm not saying he's a bad club player by any means, but something about when he's in that red jersey, he does damage.
Yeah, completely different situation, and it could be the last games of his career. He's out of contract at Real Madrid. If they qualify, I think he'll sign a short-term deal. Tottenham's name has come up. Cardiff City's name has come up. If they don't qualify, he might not play anymore. I don't think he's as motivated in the club game. I think the experience he's had in Madrid hasn't been a good one for him. And, he's been very successful early on, but it's really gone sour here lately. So I'm fascinated to see what happens next for Gareth Bale, but I think he will be preparing for a World Cup, in my opinion.
And regardless of whichever three of these European teams make it, Group B has been discussed as the geopolitical group because you have England, Iran, and the U.S. in there. So what do you favor those chances of each team? Let's just break it down.
I think it's England and the U.S. who go through. They're the two top seeds. They should go through according to the FIFA rankings. Neither one wants it to come down to the last day, just because of what that last day could entail for them. It could be England and Scotland, for example, which is always a difficult game, no matter how good those teams are. That's always a difficult one. And the U.S. doesn't want it to come down to the last day where they have to play Iran because of what that entails politically. So you've got to take care of business early on. The first games, I think, are critical for England and the U.S. England plays Iran in game one. They need to get off to a good start so they can breathe. The U.S. needs to beat whoever comes out of that UEFA pathway. And if it's Wales or Scotland or Ukraine, I think the U.S. will be favored, and I think they should be able to take care of that business. Then game 2, it's England and the U.S., and honestly, they might be happy if they draw that. If there's a loser in that, then that team's going to have to suffer on the last day, and you could see a surprise. And do not discount Iran. I think the challenging thing about this World Cup, more so than any other, part of it is because world football has really changed with the Nations League in UEFA, in CONCACAF. You don't get as many of those friendlies with Iran playing somebody or, Ecuador playing somebody in Europe. You don't get those games anymore. So it's hard to compare. Iran's been incredibly successful in the Asian World Cup qualifiers, but how do they handle playing the United States? How do they handle playing England and playing a different kind of competition? We don't really know, and we're not really gonna know until we get there. And, the preparation for this tournament's different. You're not going to get guys for 3 weeks to a month before the tournament and be able to go into a training camp and all of that and have a friendly or two along the way. You're going to get guys who are playing in major European leagues a week before the tournament. And that's going to be really difficult. How teams handle that is going to be a challenge. You're going to get Nations League games in the summer. You're going to get a window in September that UEFA has Nation League games in. What do these teams do to prepare? So like for Iran, for example, who are they going to be able to play to prepare for the United States, to prepare for England? I can't wait to see what they do there, because right now I just don't know how they stack up until we see it.
It's probably going to be like for Iran's preparation, maybe that they find possibly some European team that may have qualified for, because every team that qualified for World Cup, they're going to want preparation.
But the European teams,
That's
you're not
true.
going to be able to get them because the Nations League. That's what's so tricky is you'll have the South American teams to deal with. There's not really a South American team that plays in a US or England style. You can play African teams potentially. Again, you're not going to get that same kind of a matchup. So CONCACAF, it's not even going to be easy for Iran to get those games. You could have maybe got Mexico or Canada, and we'll see if maybe they try to schedule Canada, which could be interesting, but it's a very limited window for them because CONCACAF has its own Nations League in June. So it's going to be very different. You're not going to see, those send-off series kind of things like the US would do, where you'd play a simulated World Cup group with 3 games in a period of time like a group would be. You're just not going to be able to pull those things off anymore.
So you're taking that England and US, regardless of whoever comes from the UEFA pathway. Okay,
I think England and the US get through, but if Iran pulls a point out of England in game 1, it's going to be difficult for them. And if there is a loser in the England-US game, it's going to be difficult for whoever that loser would be.
Okay. All right. Let's move to Group C. Very fascinating group. You have Argentina, and this is potentially Lionel Messi's last World Cup. Then you have Saudi Arabia, who's shown very strong in their Asian World Cup qualifying group. And out of the 2 Asian groups, Saudi Arabia was definitely the more difficult one, alongside Japan and Australia. China and Vietnam was in that group as well, and I think Oman was in there too.
Yes.
So Saudi Arabia finished in first place on the last match day. Then you got Mexico, who had some interesting struggles in their own campaign, but managed to sneak in. I think they finished in second in the group in CONCACAF behind Canada. And then you have Poland, who undoubtedly have the world's most informed striker in Lewandowski. So what do you make of this group?
I think Mexico's got a much more difficult draw than the US. And going into this, Argentina, to me, is the clear favorite in this group, coming off of a really strong qualification process where they didn't lose a game. They have one more game with Brazil that needed to get made up. It doesn't matter. They're both through. It's just for show and for money more than anything, and for pride, because neither one of them have lost in this qualification process. But Argentina is also coming off of a Copa America win last summer. And that was something that this group of players, who beyond Messi, you've got some incredibly talented guys in Lautaro Martinez and Angel Di Maria and You've got such a group of personalities, but I think what's changed is this is a group that is playing for their icon in Lionel Messi. Before, I think everybody kind of stood around and waited for Messi to win games for them. Now, knowing where he is in his career, knowing, his age and what he can do and maybe what he can't do at this stage, you get guys who are playing for him, and it's just a different mentality. I think Argentina will handle the group stage pretty well. Second place is a toss-up. Saudi Arabia, kind of the same things we talked about with Iran. How do they stack up against a Mexico? How do they stack up against a Poland? They didn't play those kinds of teams over the last few years. So how do they adjust? They have the talent to compete. Mexico is going to be, I would expect, a very veteran-laden team with a couple of very explosive players, and they've got a goalkeeper in Memo Ochoa, who's one of the best ever. Poland is the one that I could see going through here second because of Lewandowski, because of Charlotte FC's Karol Swiderski. This is a really good Polish team, and I think it comes down to the games between Saudi Arabia, Mexico, and Poland. And kind of the flow is Poland finishes with Argentina. They need to get wins in their first two over Mexico and Saudi Arabia. They don't want it to come down to game 3. Saudi Arabia and Mexico finish on that last day. I think what could determine the group is the first match day with Mexico and Poland. If Poland gets a win there, I don't see Mexico getting enough against Argentina and Saudi Arabia to get through. And I think Poland can then manage the game with Saudi Arabia and Argentina, who they would think would have already qualified by that point. So I think Poland gets through at the expense of Mexico and Saudi Arabia.
All right. I think the other kind of not really talked about is that, I think Saudi Arabia may have somewhat of a home advantage too, since the World Cup's in Qatar, not too far away, and the climate is arguably similar between Qatar and Saudi Arabia. So they may, probably be used to the climates and have some sort of a advantage. Probably geographically, they'll have a lot of fans there to support them. So it could turn into a home game for the Saudis.
Yeah, I think that group with the fan support, that's an interesting point because, Argentina always draws everywhere they go. They always sell a ton of tickets. There'll be loud support for Argentina in the venues and loud support for Lionel Messi specifically. Mexico sells a ton of tickets. They travel really, really well. So this group will be interesting with fan support. Poland is the one who maybe at times will feel like the visitors in every game.
Let's do group. All right. So moving into Group D, which is could be eerily similar to the one in the last World Cup, because you have France and Denmark pitted together, and a possibility of getting Peru in there if they are able to handle either Australia or the United Arab Emirates. So, and then you have Tunisia, who is making another return to the World Cup. So let's first dive into the unknown. So between Peru, Australia, and the United Arab Emirates, which of those three you think has the shot to go?
I don't think the UAE can pull this off. I think it's going to be Australia and Peru. And this hasn't been a good run for Australia right now. They dropped points in qualification that caught a lot of people by surprise. It was a tough group they were in Asia, but I didn't see them falling into the playoff when we started this process, especially even after match day 1, where Japan lost to Oman. It looked like Japan was the one who was wobbly. They gained strength as the qualification process went on, and Australia lost it. There was some talk that they might make a change of manager. They haven't. I think Peru takes care of it. Peru, having been there last time and finishing the way they did in CONMEBOL, Ricardo Gareca, I think, is one of the more underrated coaches in the world. And Peru looked gone early in the 18-game marathon that is CONMEBOL World Cup qualifying. But they turned it around and finished incredibly strong. They've got a couple of players who they missed at the end of the campaign. We'll see if they can get them back. Paulo Guerrero, even at his age, is still a really vital part of this team. But the story with Gianluca Lapadula for Peru, playing in the second division in Italy, He had been called into an Italian national team camp a while back, didn't play or didn't make the trip. Can't remember exactly what it was. Had Peruvian heritage, ends up taking the call for Peru, and he's been great for them, and his goals have been critical. So I think Peru's got the momentum. I think they get through, and I think they make it to the World Cup.
Okay. And even given that no longer is the case of these intercontinental playoffs, is that it's a home and a home. It's just one game. All of those Confederation playoffs are in Qatar. And, would you consider that, with this game, I mean, Peru is very difficult to beat at home, but now if this, one-off game is in a neutral site, Qatar's in Asia. So if it's either Australia, if United Arab Emirates does beat Australia, United Arab Emirates, that they may have a home advantage there.
Yeah, that would be trickier. But then when you talk about the quality of the teams, I don't think there's much of a comparison. I think Peru's a much stronger team, but that would make it trickier for sure. I just don't see the UAE getting through Australia. And even if it was going back to the old school home and away, which this one isn't, Peru handled New Zealand last time and got through and traveled and got the result they needed on the road, won it back at home. I think in a neutral site game with either one of those teams, I think Peru's the stronger of the two.
And then if we think that Peru will be the winner, then Peru will be in a group once again with France and Denmark, and then Tunisia is added in there. So let's talk about the other three teams. So what do you make of this group? It seems like France and Denmark must be the clear favorites to get out.
Yeah, seems like France for sure. Denmark should, obviously a lot relying on Christian Eriksen, who's returned to play, and his story is just unbelievable what he's doing with Brentford and what he's done with Denmark, scoring a goal on his return. France should be through here, shouldn't be much of a problem. Tunisia is a team that, could cause a surprise, possibly. I think Peru and Tunisia, and even if it was Australia or UAE, I just think they're overmatched here in terms of quality. I think it's France and Denmark, barring anything crazy.
And especially with Denmark, like they had probably the best run of the qualifiers for Europe. They won every single game, and I think it was until the last two match days that even given up a goal. So they're very strong.
Yeah, good squad, really good squad. I think France is a favorite to win the whole thing. Denmark is a team that you really don't want to see when you get into the knockout rounds. I think they get there out of this group.
All right, let's move into Group E. So Group E is very interesting. So there's still an outlier between New Zealand and Costa Rica. And then you have two former World Cup champions in Spain and Germany. And then, Japan, being half Japanese, I kind of was a little bit disappointed in the group because that's a tough one for them, but shouldn't count them out. What do you make of this group? Or actually, let's start off with who do you think, New Zealand or Costa Rica, will fill this?
I think it's a toss-up. And games like this that are a toss-up, Costa Rica is kind of like Peru in that they were not in a great spot in qualifying. Their coach hasn't really won everybody over. There's some players who have opted out of playing for the national team at the moment. But you got a bunch of veterans, and you've got a goalkeeper in Keylor Navas who can get you here. In a single game, Keylor Navas can get you to this point if you're Costa Rica. I think they'll be able to handle New Zealand, who will be physical, who will be pretty direct. I think that will suit Costa Rica in this one. If you were facing a team that will make Costa Rica have to run a lot, make them have to work a lot, I worry about it. But that back line for Costa Rica, led by a couple of players that we know from MLS, either past or present, Kendall Waston, Francisco Calvo, I think they're guys who can deal with the threat that New Zealand provides. And I think Keylor Navas can get Costa Rica here. Now, once you get into the World Cup, I think Costa Rica or New Zealand would be incredibly overmatched in this group, and they can only really play the role of spoiler. Japan has to get off to a good start. They get Germany in game one. That's not going to be easy. Game two, they get the wild card team. They've got to get 3 points there and then go into the Spain game with a shot. It can happen. I mean, that's the interesting thing about when you get into the schedules for these groups and where teams get slotted. That's when it can get a little weird when you look at the order you play. Spain gets the wild card first. That should be 3 points. They play Germany second. They finish with Japan. Germany gets Japan first. Germany plays Spain second. They finish with the wild card last. So it's almost like Germany, you're looking at it like, well, we got 3 in the last match day because you should. I mean, you're not taking anything for granted, but that's what you should be thinking about. They're going to start game 1 with Japan and Germany. Typically, we see growing into the tournament. So that's a little bit of an opportunity for Japan in game 1 to maybe pull a point, maybe pull even more in a surprise, because Germany, this schedule kind of suits that. Game 1, game 2 is a tough one. Game 3 is a game they should win. They typically grow as the tournament goes on. Japan's got to start hot to put pressure on them. I think it's Germany and Spain. I think they're 2 of the best teams. I think they're 2 teams that could, even be potential semifinalists, and being in the same group is just brutal. But Germany's ranking knocked them into the second pot. Spain, great run for them under Luis Enrique. They're getting really young. A lot of the Barcelona young starlets are starting to come good at the national team level. 2 guys like Pedri and Gavi to watch for the Spain team. You give them another 6 months to develop under Xavi, who I think is doing a great job at Barcelona, and Spain could be a World Cup favorite by the time we get to Qatar.
The other interesting thing with the Japanese national team, like their coach hasn't always won the fans over, because Japan got off to kind of a rocky start, losing to Oman, and then they kind of, pick things up. They beat Australia in both legs and were able to beat Saudi Arabia at home. So that kind of trajected their they got into a better situation, because I was worried that they would finish in that 3rd spot, and that would have been very difficult. They do have, checking out their previous rosters for their most recent games, like a lot of the Japanese players play in European leagues, and quite a handful play in the Bundesliga. So going up against an opponent in Germany and knowing the style of play, it may benefit them.
Yeah, it's a good point. In that game 1, they're going to have some familiarity with the German mentality, the German style. I wouldn't be shocked if Japan gets a point there. And if you kind of play it out and you look at, okay, a point in that game, 3 points for Spain in their first game, then 3 points for Japan against against Costa Rica, who I think it will be, and I think Japan can beat them and get the 3. So then Japan's on 4. Spain and Germany, okay, 2 evenly matched teams. Let's say a draw. You could be looking at the last match day with Spain and Japan on 4, Germany on 2, but Germany is playing the weakest team on the last match day. You think they can get to 5, and Japan and Spain for all the marbles in the last day of the group. And that's a game that might be one of these last match day matches that you have to make sure you're watching.
And easily the last World Cup, the round of 16 game between Japan and Belgium was probably the most exciting, heart-wrenching defeat I've seen, but it was a good game.
It was incredible. And you could be looking at a day like that with Japan and Spain with everything to play for on that last match day.
So let's move into Group F, which is very interesting. Canada makes its first return to the World Cup since 1986, and I believe only Atiba Hutchinson was alive on the Canadian team when they were last in it. You have Belgium and Morocco, and then you have Croatia. So what do you make of this group? Who are the favorites? What do you think?
This one's a weird one because Belgium's the seeded team. If they don't get through, then it's just a horrible close to this golden generation that they've had that has generally been a disappointment, because I think people expected Belgium to break through and get a major championship, if not the World Cup, the Euros, and they just haven't been able to do it with this group. Roberto Martinez has done a good job, but not the job that he was hired for. I think the expectation was larger than what they've delivered on. So they're a top seed, but a more vulnerable top seed, in my opinion. Croatia, I mean, you're talking about the finalists last time around. You're talking about Luka Modric at 36, and he plays like he's 16. Just an incredible player. Can he still be that in 6 more months? Father Time catches up, and sometimes really quickly, but he's not showing any signs of it right now. Luka Modric has been incredible. Canada's a tough out too. Morocco's a tough out too. You know, this is a group that could go any which way. Group A, we talked about that and how difficult it could be. I think this one is another one that kind of falls into that, where I could see Morocco pulling upsets. You've got players with a lot of pedigree in this Moroccan team. I could see Canada pulling upsets. They've got one of the best players in CONCACAF and Alphonso Davies. They've got Jonathan David. They've got goal scorers. They've got a good goalkeeper in Borjan. They can handle the stress that comes into this. They've shown that quality playing the US and playing Mexico. Now, you're playing different teams in this, and just like we've talked about with countries who haven't had the opportunity to play different kinds of teams, Canada's going to be in that a little bit. I think what they do friendly wise in the second part of that June window, where it looks like the US, for example, is going to play Uruguay. What can Canada get scheduled in that? And what can they do in the September window to get ready for this tournament? That's going to be critical for them, because Belgium, while they've had disappointments, they got pedigree. Croatia, pedigree. Morocco, pedigree. This is a veteran-laden team. Canada, veteran team, but they haven't been to a World Cup since '86. They don't really have any institutional knowledge on what they're about to walk into. And game one for them is against Belgium, where, you know, if you're not fully prepared and you go into that with the talent that Belgium has, and maybe one of the best players in the world right now, and Kevin De Bruyne, you could start your World Cup with a very bad day, and that's hard to overcome physically and emotionally. So they got to prepare the right way. I think Croatia wins the group, and I think second place is a total crapshoot. Belgium should take it, but they're going to have to establish some dominance here. Croatia and Belgium play on the last day, so that actually kind of helps Belgium, that they get 2 games that they'll be favored in. They should win. I think Croatia ends up winning the group, though.
All right. And let's see, let's move into Group G, which is another one of those deja vu groups with but the similar one with France and Denmark, and if Peru wins. So you have 3 teams that were all in the same group as in 2018. So Brazil, Serbia, Switzerland are buddies once again in a group, and then you add in Cameroon in there. So what do you make of this group here?
Brazil is my favorite right now to win the World Cup. They have just run roughshod through CONMEBOL qualifying. Incredibly talented team. I think Brazil handles everything in front of them pretty well until you get to the knockout rounds, and we'll have to see where things fall. So that's one team going through. Serbia, you know, you're looking at somebody like Luka Jovic, like Alexander Mitrovic up top. Can they get you enough goals? You have Milinkovic Savic, a great player in the midfield. This is a very good team in Serbia. Switzerland, you've got Granit Xhaka as your captain. You've got Xherdan Shaqiri now with the Chicago Fire. The midfield is strong. Do they have enough up top? I don't know. Cameroon, I'm not very high on. They hosted the AFCON tournament at the beginning of the year. They didn't really play very well in that. They had some results that were pretty surprising in that tournament. They ended up getting deeper into it, but it was a struggle. Cameroon also typically, and I love Cameroon ever since the 1990 World Cup, and their match with England is still one of my all-time favorite World Cup matches. Cameroon has a bad tendency to self-destruct when you get to this point because of the lack of organization at the federation level, promises that get made to players about pay and bonuses that end up not getting delivered on. I don't have high hopes for Cameroon. So I think second place comes down to Serbia and Switzerland. I think Serbia is a stronger team. I think they end up taking it, but I think Brazil wins all 3 games.
And do you find it interesting that there's possibly two groups that can have 3 of the same teams as last time?
It's just weird. It's just weird how that happened. World Cup, you get these flukes sometimes where it does this. And I love when we get different kinds of matchups. But yeah, it seems like a lot of times you see familiar foes on the other side of the pitch.
And then, of course, with Nigeria getting knocked out, you're no longer going to see an Argentina-Nigeria classic again in the World Cup, unfortunately.
Seen a few of those. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got last group here. We have Portugal, Ghana, Uruguay, and South Korea. And similar to an iconic player in Cristiano Ronaldo, this could be his last World Cup as well. So what do you make of this group?
If there is a group of death, this is the group of death. You have revenge on a bunch of teams' minds in this group, and you've got veterans, you've got incredible young talents. This thing could go any which way. It really could. The last match day in Group H is the best last match day possibly in World Cup history, because you've got Ghana and Uruguay, and go back to 2010
Yep.
and go back to Luis Suarez with the best handball in the history of the tournament. He had to do it. He did it. He got red carded. All Ghana had to do was convert the penalty. They didn't. They end up losing it in the shootout. Luis Suarez, by committing to handball, got his team one more game. Now, they couldn't get through. Diego Forlan in that tournament was incredible. But Ghana wants revenge in the worst way on Uruguay. Portugal wants revenge in the worst way on South Korea. Go back to 2002, the last match day there. The U.S. Choke against Poland on the last match day. It was already eliminated. U.S. is losing. South Korea and Portugal are all set to go through, and South Korea ends up beating Portugal, which knocks them out, and the U.S. goes through instead. So Portugal's going to want that revenge. Can Cristiano Ronaldo hold up? That's the question. I think with Portugal is, can he hold up? It's been a very up and down year at Manchester United for him. No guarantees he's there next year. So what does he do at the club level in the first part of the next season that's going to impact his run into the World Cup? Uruguay, veteran-laden team. Edinson Cavani, he's going to be out of contract at the end of the year at Manchester United. Luis Suarez not playing a ton at Atleti. What's next for him? But you got Darwin Nunez, incredible young talent who's at Benfica, who's probably in line for a big move. South Korea, you've got Son, who's one of the best players right now in the Premier League. Ghana, I think, is a team that has shown that they can get through. When we talk about the African teams, I mentioned Cameroon in the last group, where I feel like they're a team that self-destructs at times. Ghana's the opposite. Ghana's strong, and Ghana's difficult in these tournaments. They start with Portugal, they get South Korea in the middle, they get the revenge match with Uruguay to end it. I have no idea where this group goes. I really, truly don't. If I had to pick something right now, I lean towards Uruguay and South Korea. I really do. I think Portugal is going to rely too much on Ronaldo and Pepe. Both 37 and 38, 36 and 38, something like that. I mean, I don't know what condition they're in by the time they get to Qatar. Not having that time to decompress after a season and really having a week after you play. They'll get a little bit longer because they're the last group, so they'll get about a week and a half. But I think it's going to hurt them. I think Uruguay, with what they've done under Diego Alonso once he took over, they've been outstanding in South America. They looked like they weren't going to make it under their veteran manager Tabares, who it was time to go. They make the change, and Alonso comes in, and they've been incredible since. So I think Uruguay riding a lot of momentum. They've got to keep people healthy. That's a challenge, but they're a team that knows how to play tournament football. They'll be defensive. They will sit back. They'll rely on those veterans to do things in big moments when they need them. And they've got a guy like Nunez. They've got a guy like Facundo Torres. They've got Diego Rossi, who we've seen in MLS, Brian Rodriguez. They've got young guys to support them. I think Uruguay can get through, and I think South Korea can really get through. This feels like, and I haven't picked a ton of like surprises, but it feels like a tournament when we get these in different parts of the world rather than Europe or South America. Maybe we get more surprises when the tournament's been in Asia or in Africa in the past, or in North America. And South Korea maybe is the surprise for me out of this group. So I'll go Uruguay and South Korea again now.
Okay. All right. And then speaking of the revenge, I mean, South Korea may want some revenge on Uruguay because they knocked them out in the 2010 World Cup in the round of 16. I think it was Suarez that scored the game-winning goal in the extra time, I
Yep,
believe.
another layer of revenge in this group. This is the group of death. It's not the same kind of group of death because of just the way the seedings go, but this is the group of death.
And also interesting because Ghana wasn't at the last World Cup, but the last World Cup that they were in 14, Portugal was also in that group with U.S. and Germany in that one. And so it's a lot of mixed connections in that one. So you said that Brazil is your favorite to win it all?
Yeah, I think Brazil is going to be really difficult for anybody to beat. Now, Brazil is another one that can self-destruct from time to time, but you start to look at their path. And if they win Group G, like I would expect, they'll play the runners-up of Group H. It'll be one of South Korea or Uruguay, if my predictions hold. It could be a Portugal, it could be a Ghana. I like Brazil in any of those matchups. I'm not overly concerned about them in any of those. Then you're going to face the winner of Group E or the runner-up from F. Let's play it out kind of the way that I've talked about it. That could be Spain. That'd be a great match. Man, I would love to see Brazil-Spain in a World Cup quarterfinal this time around. I still think Brazil would be favored there. I think Spain is probably a cycle away from being as good as I think they can be with all that young talent that's starting to come through. They'll be good here, but that might be their like, hey, you're not quite there yet kind of moment. To have a round of 16 and a quarterfinal that you're looking at who it could be and how it could fall. When Brazil sits there and starts mapping this out, it's like, okay, that's, it's not going to be easy if you get Spain in a quarterfinal. It's not going to be easy if you get Uruguay, because that's a blood feud going back in history. If you get a South Korea, if you get, a Portugal, and you have to do, Brazil, Portugal, that's, you talk about rivalry. There's another one for you. That's not easy, but I think they can handle those things. I think they're a much more talented team. And you get to a semifinal, Brazil, I think, is the most talented team. And you never know, like, that's the thing about picking a World Cup is, especially this time around, we never know, like, what if Neymar gets hurt? What if they lose a goalkeeper? What if, they have a key player who's in a weird club situation going into the second half of the calendar year, the first half of the season, where then they're going to come straight into the World Cup. There's things that are unknown that can wreck this. But in terms of how they qualified, in terms of overall talent, I think Brazil is the team to beat.
All right, cool. And one last thing. This is at the moment that we know, this is the last World Cup that will feature 32 teams in 8 groups of 4, because next World Cup it's expanded to 48 teams in 3 team groups. So what do you think of this format change?
This is the best World Cup format. And I'm really disappointed that they're going the direction they're going. I understand expanding the tournament. I get it. FIFA is all about making that money. I know. I'm not shocked that they want more teams in it. I think this right now feels like the perfect setup, because it's hard to qualify, but your best teams should qualify. When they don't, it's a failure. When Italy doesn't make it, when Colombia doesn't make it, when the US and the Netherlands didn't make it last time, and Italy, and Ghana, okay, that's a disappointment. That's a failure. But your best teams should qualify with the current format. You could tweak it and give an extra berth here, there, and whatever. That's fine. But then the way it plays out, the 8 groups of 4, ideal. 2 teams make it out of the group, ideal. Everything is set up perfectly. I don't like the idea of 3-team groups at all. They should keep 4-team groups. Everybody should get 3 games at a World Cup. If that means they would have to bring back 3rd place teams getting through into knockout rounds, depending on how they want to set it up, that's fine. I would think they'd want more games to play 3-team or 4-team groups rather than 3-team groups. I don't like getting 2 games in a group to grow and build, like I mentioned with Germany, how they grow into a tournament. I don't like 2 games and then you're straight into knockouts. I don't like that setup. I hope they consider formatting. I don't think they are. I think it's probably too late for this one because you're already starting to figure out like where your locations are going to be, what levels of games they're going to get. You've got to have your at least rough idea of a schedule done. So I don't think they're going to do it, but I wish that they would sit down and say, all right, we want to go to 48 teams. Fine. Some qualification processes are not going to be as compelling as they have been. That's the trade-off you make. Okay, again, fine. I don't like it, but whatever. The actual tournament and only getting 2 guaranteed games, that's the one I hope they change. And I think they could if they want, and I wish they would. It'd be more World Cup games. Duh, we all love that. But it would be more of a fair tournament. Because if you get off to a slow start in 3 games, you got 2 games to fix it. You come in and have a slow start in 2 games, you're probably done.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't like it.
The other thing is that how would like the final match days work in a 3-team group? Because you could see, because you could see like teams literally like without the benefit of both like final match days, all 4 teams play at the same time. So there's no like adjustment, last minute or last hour adjustments of formations. It's like you have to, just like in final match day in Premier League or any of the major leagues, every single team, whether you're in first or last, you play so that there's no advantage, like a strong advantage. So it's kind of, I agree with you. It's
you're going to have meaningless games on the last match day, and you're going to have shenanigans on the last match day because you're going to have teams that have nothing to play for going into their second game because they won their first and because of the way the group fell, and they might play for seeding. They would rather play a weaker team depending on how the other groups went. They might help somebody out. You might get 2 teams that play and they get a draw and they both go through, and we get what we've seen in the tournament before they changed the format of the scheduling. It's not a good idea from FIFA to do this, but FIFA's made some bad ideas happen over the years. I do hope they reconsider and play 4-team groups in 2026.
We'll end it here, Jason. I appreciate. I think this is your 4th time, I think, on the show. So I appreciate it all, and hopefully good luck with Atlanta United the rest of the way there. I saw that they lost to Charlotte the other day, so hopefully they can kind of rebound on that.
Yeah, looking forward to bouncing back this weekend against Cincinnati. We'll see where it can go. It's going to be a fun run through this season because we don't have those interruptions in the summer like we typically do. We've got a June international window, so there'll be a little bit of a break, but you don't have as many midweek games. It's pretty much a game a week. And MLS this season, it's the best the league's ever been. You got great competition top to bottom in this league. Every game is tough. So I've loved it. Cincinnati at Mercedes-Benz Stadium before 2 on the road. So hopefully Atlanta can get back on the winning side this weekend.
Cool. So Jason, I appreciate you coming on the show, and hope you have a good rest of the week here, and we'll catch up soon enough.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you.